Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Dundalk Urban District Council, I wish to publicly acknowledge Dr. James Armstrong on his joining the Royal Army Medical Corps, and we wish him well in his fight against the common enemy. Well done, young man.
Have you seen my Patrick today?
Are you ready to fight for Ireland?
Private John Patrick Connolly was killed in action in France, October 1915.
Are you going to fight the common enemy?
Younger Private Patrick was killed in action in France on the 10th of June 1915.
Are you enlisting, sir?
Private Thomas Doherty has been killed in action.
Are you ready to defend your country?
My dear people, the interests of Ireland, of the whole of Ireland, are at stake in this war.
Well said, Mr. Blackman.
As an Irishman, I feel it is my duty to protest against the British government deferring the Home Rule Bill until after the war.
This war is undertaken in defence of the highest principles of morality and right.
The British Liberal Party has been publicly pledging for 28 years to give self-government to Ireland. It has not yet fulfilled that pledge.
It would be a disgrace forever to our country, and a reproach to our manhood, and a denial of the lessons of our history, if young Ireland confine their efforts to remaining at home to defend this country from an unlikely invasion.
This same British Liberal Party now wants the people of Ireland to contribute their blood, their honour, and their manhood in a war that in no wise concerns them.
People of Ireland must not shrink from their duty of proving on the battlefield the gallantry and courage which has distinguished our race all down through its history.
There is no gain, moral or material, that Irishmen can draw from assailing Germany. Ireland has no blood to give to any land or any cause save that of Ireland. Ireland has suffered at the hands of British administrations a more prolonged series of evils deliberately inflicted than any other community of civilized men.
I say to you, your duty is twofold, and I'm glad to see such magnificent material all around me for soldiers. And I say to you, go on drilling and be efficient for the work.
If Irish blood is to be the seal which brings all Ireland together in one nation, and liberties equal and common to all, then let that blood be shed in Ireland, where alone it can be righteously shed to secure those liberties.
Men of Ireland, account yourselves as men, not only for Ireland itself, but wherever the fighting line extends, in defence of right, freedom, and religion.
Speaking as one who helped to found the Irish Volunteers, I say, in their name, that no Irishman fit to bear arms in the cause of his country's freedom can join the Allied millions now attacking Germany.
Peter! Sorry, Councillor Hughes. You'll vote for it, won't you?
I already have, Paddy. We shouldn't even be having this meeting here tonight. It was already decided.
But you'll make sure. It's our town hall as well.
I'll do my best.
You won't let them block it.
Look, Paddy, I'm your brother, and even I have my suspicions, considering the way you and your lot have been acting recently.
I don't want to argue with you again.
Well, you have your way, Paddy, and I have mine, alright?
We have our rights.
And what about Councillor Tono's rights? You're not beat the living daylights out of him.
It's our town hall as well.
We'll see what happens, Paddy, alright?
Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to call the meeting to order. and I will call on the town clerk to read the letter convening tonight's special meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. Sir, we, the undersigned members of the Dundalk Urban District Council, request you call a special meeting of the Council for the purpose of considering, and if so ordered, rescind the resolution giving the use of the Town Hall to the Irish Volunteers for a lecture on Easter Sunday.
Town Clerk, may I inquire, what have you on the books in connection with that resolution?
Here is the minute from the last meeting of the Urban District Council. Tuesday, 11th of April 1916. Mr McCoy asked that the letter received from the Secretary of the Irish Volunteers Dundalk asking for the hall on Easter Sunday be read. Town Clerk having read same, Mr O'Rourke proposed and Mr McCoy seconded that the application be granted. After a discussion thereon, Mr Moyna moved an amendment that as the hall is wanted for a body of people which is against recruiting, that the same be not less.
My reason for asking that, Mr Chairman,
Yes, Councillor Hughes?
was that it was my understanding that any resolution on the books cannot be rescinded without a 2/3 majority.
Well, certainly it's illegal, and we all know that.
In addition to that, Mr Chairman, I hold that any meeting which is convened for the purpose of rescinding a resolution requires a clear 3 days' notice, and the notice we received, such is not the case.
The notices were sent out on Friday.
They were sent out Saturday, Town Clerk.
They were posted to be delivered on Friday night.
I received mine Friday night in the 8 o'clock post.
Mine came on Friday night.
There it is, stamped for the 14th.
14th was Friday.
Very well. No, Sunday doesn't count. This objection put to it.
2 days, sir, are quite sufficient for a special meeting.
Indeed, Town Clerk. Well, Town Clerk, there's actually another matter I'd like to raise in relation to the letter that came from the parties making the application. Was it for the Easter Sunday night that they wished the hall? Would you mind reading that letter again, please, sir?
Yes. Dundalk, March 27, 1916. Dear Sir, on behalf of the Dundalk Corps of the Irish Volunteers, I beg to apply for the use of the Town Hall on the night of Easter Sunday for the purpose of a public lecture. Yours sincerely, P. McQuillan, Honorary Secretary.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Well, I, for one, would give the place to a black man, and so I don't see why the natives from the town wouldn't get it. I would give the place to Sir Edward Carson if he wanted it. We gave it to the Royal Field Artillery, and I'd give it to Carson.
Well, Mr McCoy certainly would not.
Well, Redmond thought it was an honour to stand on the same platform with him. And the reason I raise this point is there was one commissioner in particular spoke very strongly against the motion. I believe he was a sergeant major or a recruiting sergeant or...
Lieutenant Moyna. Call him by his proper name and don't be disrespectful.
It's not so long ago since Mr McCoy would not have said anything against Mr Stephen Moyna, and I don't think he should say it now. I don't like to hear it said.
I was never complimentary to that man.
I would ask you, Mr McCoy, to speak with respect of your brother members.
What did I say?
You'd no right to say he was a sergeant major.
Well, if he was a sergeant major, he'd have to be a good man.
As I've already said here tonight, you're the last person in this room that should call him by such a name, Mr Moyna, and you and I know it.
Excuse me, I'd like to have that out about Mr Moyna. He stated that it was for the Easter Sunday night that they wanted the hall, and if it was for any other night, he was satisfied to let them have it.
I don't understand the point you're trying to make. The application clearly stated that it was for the night of Easter Sunday.
The point I'm making is that you're after making an observation that I would like to be understood properly. That I shouldn't say a word about Mr. Stephen Moyna, and I would like to know from you, Chairman, what claim you think he has on me.
I didn't say he has any claim on you, but I would ask you to speak with respect of your brother members. They have said nothing against you.
All right to them. There's nothing wrong in calling him a sergeant major.
Well, that is not a position he held, and don't pretend otherwise. I will not allow any member to insult another member of the council in their presence or in their absence.
This is all besides the point anyway. The fact is, if these men want the hall, they're entitled to it. They've offered £3 and 10 shillings. And the property is the property of the ratepayers. And it's neither your property nor mine. We are merely trustees, and I would not be so bigoted as to refuse the use of the hall to these men if they wanted it. If the Home Defence Committee, which is composed of Catholics and Protestants, wanted the hall, I wouldn't say a word. These men are prepared to pay for it, and I don't see why we should deprive them of it. We gave it to the Royal Field Artillery for nothing, and we gave it to the Red Cross for nothing, and we give it to any other institution so long as they require it for a certain purpose. Now, some people may have made something of the talk.
This is intolerable.
What, that hurts you? The people that are making all the money?
That does not hurt me.
That is an insidious lie. My brother has made nothing from it, and I ask you to withdraw.
You have suggested it, sir, and I have given it the lie. I have done a great deal of voluntary work.
Excuse me, I withdraw nothing.
You're a total McCoy. I have done a great deal of voluntary work, night and day, for the cause which I have at heart. The common cause, which every man who supports the Irish Parliamentary Party and the cause of Ireland should have at their hearts here tonight. I done that work for nothing, sir. And if you suggest that I was paid, I stigmatise you a liar.
You are not working for nothing,
You're a liar.
And you, sir, most definitely are another.
If this is the depths that we have come to in public discussions tonight, it is good. I know you've made those statements behind my back, and now you're trying to make them before my face. Well, I sort of say you are a liar.
And I know that there's people like you going around this town like decoy ducks.
Don't you overstep the law of slander, Mr. McCoy. Of course, as we all know, Mr. McCoy, you're not worth an action of slander.
McGann, we know you're not even worth tuppence.
A lying statement is made about any member of this council, whether it be my own brother or a stranger. I ask that it should be withdrawn. And as far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, as a member of the Louth Recruiting Committee, the statement is utterly without foundation. Now, I hope that we will have no more insults hurled at one another for the rest of the night.
Well, maybe they shouldn't take it to themselves.
McCoy, first of all, you insult Mr. Moyna behind his back. And now you're trying to insult me before my face. Well, I'll not take it from you, sir, nor a better man than you. Don't think you can grow me down. You're in the wrong box.
He stated that I said things behind his back, and I contradict that as a lie.
I asked you, Chairman, to come here tonight to keep order because I knew this gentleman was coming here to throw innuendos in my face and suggest that I made money out of recruiting. Well, it's a damned lie.
Your interests are in it.
As should yours be, sir, if you were an Irishman.
An Irishman? What am I to do with
And
England?
a patriot.
A patriot for what?
Your country, sir. The common cause and your country.
What you have is 90-year-old money for Britain.
Please. We've been called here tonight for a special purpose. And as the person whose name first appears on the letter is not present, I will ask somebody else to move.
It is up to me to move, Mr. Chairman.
What a surprise.
Indeed, Mr. McCoy. And I take great pleasure in moving that the town hall not be let to any body of men calling themselves the Irish Volunteers, whom, as we all know, under the aegis of Owen McNeill, departed from the National Volunteers as first form, and of which I, Mr. McCoy, was a very, very proud member. Indeed. And now, we are asked to let the hall to a body of men who were opposed to the great bulk of opinion in Ireland. Are we to allow Dundalk be prostituted for those opinions? Well, I think not. And now, we are asked by a miserable minority to support them in that propaganda. Well, I say that if the ratepayers' property is to be let for such a purpose, that we have no right being here. For we are misrepresenting the townspeople who sent us here tonight.
Sit down again for once, Jesus.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Oh, indeed, McCoy.
Let Councillor Hughes speak without interruption, please.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm going to speak as one voting against the resolution, and I'll give my reasons. Mr McGann gave us his reasons for supporting it, and in so doing bring us here a second time over a matter we should not have been brought here for at all.
Hear, hear.
In fact, the town clerk should have already decided to let the hold of these people.
It's not a joke.
Look, the volunteers are composed of men from various societies here in Dundalk. I believe that a body of men like them have as good a right to their opinions as anyone else. And if they only use the town hall, then they're responsible for their own acts. I recall you stating before, Mr Chairman, that the volunteers were a decent lot of men, and that nobody could say anything against them. I don't suppose you could repeat that for us again tonight?
Well, that's the chairman is staying strangely quiet for once. Perhaps I'll say a word. Gentlemen, as you all know, I'm always very open-minded. I may be opposed to Mr Carson, Mr Healy, Mr Redmond and that ilk. Yet it does not follow that I would get up and abuse the parties that followed them. I believe that every man has a right to think for himself, and I would have no right to dictate to him.
The man that stops at home, Mr McCoy, is not a man. He's only a coward.
Maybe you're just a party of the people that are sending them out, my
That's
God.
another insinuation that we send men out and stay at home ourselves.
If I was to listen to all the vapourings of Mr McCoy, I would have plenty to do, brother.
I didn't say a thing, my God.
Make your statements properly.
There are a lot of people talking, and it would appear from them that no person had anything to do with nationality other than themselves. So far as John Redmond and his national volunteers are concerned, if we're up to them, there will not be any organisation of dissent left in Ireland, as we'll all be all fighting in France.
Do you mean Mr McCoy with that statement?
I don't think anybody, Mr McCoy.
Well, if you mean me with it, Mr Hughes, let me tell you that that statement is untrue.
I won't be drawn.
You left the organisation, now you're out of it. Yeah, you're out of it. You're out of it, Mr
Mr
Hughes.
McGann,
You left it, you're out of it.
Mr McGann, I've always been able to make up my own mind. So far as I can see no reason whatsoever, political or otherwise, why these people, Dundalk men, should not get the town hall. The same as any other organisation. And I support the original motion that the volunteers get the town hall on the night of Easter Sunday.
I think we have discussed the matter long enough, and I will now put it to the vote. I ask those in favour of the motion that the Irish volunteers do not have the hall on Easter Sunday night to raise your hands.
Yeah.
Those against?
No.
The motion is lost. Therefore, it follows that the Irish volunteers will have the town hall on the night of Easter Sunday, and that ends the council's interest in the matter, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much.
Good stuff. Did his job for once. Thank you, Chairman.
You should disgrace and you are likewise.
You're not rested. You're not rested.
Well, Peter, how do we get on?
The council vote to allow the meeting.
Oh, not all of them, I'd bet.
What do you expect, Paddy? We're dividers now before. Just be careful. My own flesh and blood at the end of the day. Just be careful, Paddy.
My name is Stuart Agnew, and my great-grandfather Nicholas Carr was killed in the First World War on the morning of the 27th of May 1915 on the HM Majestic. Sadly, I didn't get the chance to know my great-grandfather, but heard so many stories from my family over the years about his ill-fated death in the First World War. Nicholas was born on the 29th of June 1884 in Shields Yard, Dundalk, County Louth. His late parents were Patrick and Mary Carr. Patrick was an engine driver in PJ Carroll's Dundalk. He later married Mary Ann Martin, and she gave birth to their daughter Mary Kate Carr on the 2nd of April 1915. He emigrated to England to find work in 1905 and joined the British Navy, only 21 years old. He was a seaman of the Royal Fleet Reserve and became a first-class stoker. During the war, the HM Majestic was based in the Dardanelles off the coast of Turkey, along with other British and French ships. The plan was to enable the Allies to establish a front in the Balkans for an attack on Austria and Germany. The Austrians and Germans opened attack on these ships on the 19th of February 1915, 2 British ships and 1 French ship were attacked and the British were forced to retreat. On the 9th of April 1915, 7 days after his daughter Mary Kate was born, he was in the Dardanelles surrounded by the enemy. There were 5 ships and he watched one of these ships sink in less than 3 minutes. 2 of the enemy's ships also sank on this day. His wife Mary Ann sent him money so he could return home to Dundalk, but the money arrived too late. Nicholas was already enlisted to go on another mission to the Dardanelles on the 27th of May 1915. The HM Majestic was torpedoed and the boat sank and my great-grandfather Nicholas Carr died at sea. Being asked to be part of this project gave me the opportunity to get to know my great-grandfather and really appreciate the sacrifices he made for his family.
My Patrick is no coward. They'll not stop him from marching tomorrow. He just needs to not worry about me. I'll be grand.
I have lived with the homeless and with the breadless. Wail Shocklawn, the poor, reviled and outcast, yet pure and splendid and faithful. In them I saw or seemed to see again the face of God. Ah, it is a tear-stained face, defiled with ordure, but it is the holy face.
What news have you with you?
I joined the IRB when it first started in Dundalk, about 1898. And when the Gaelic League first started, it didn't concern itself with matters outside of studying Irish history, lectures on the Irish language, and the works of Irish scholars and Irish poets.
My ancestors played a prominent role in the 98 rebellion and in the Fenian Rising. My father often told me that nothing good ever came from England. Even the wind, he would say, that blows from there is a foul one.
Well, my father joined the IRB in London, where he'd worked for a time. And when I was offered employment in Dundalk, well, he warned me against joining secret societies.
Well, I was born into a Fenian family, and I was sworn and initiated into the IRB by Thomas Harty in 1912. Well, the principal activities at the time were holding meetings off the circle, but I could see little point in all that. We were constantly hatching, but nothing ever came out of those plans.
Nothing.
I was very fortunate that the impressions made in my child mind were made by 2 men, with whom I was subsequently very closely attached, and whose honesty of purpose, bravery, sincerity and patriotism could never be questioned. Their names were Thomas Harty, Bridge Street, and Patrick Hughes, Park Street, Dundalk.
The Gaul have marched from Clifton. Is it into the hills? By Letterfrack they have come, and the pass of Kylemore, and through Glenina.
And no word from Galway.
Sinn Féin was started in Dundalk before 1910.
In the year 1906.
From 1910 to 1914, Sinn Féin had little influence in Dundalk.
About 1904 Sinn Féin started. I remember, I joined that year.
Well, the Sinn Féin in Dundalk, their main activities were holding plays and dramas such as Porrick Pierce and Robert Emmet, and putting on ceilidhs that were largely attended.
A small body of what was known as glee singers.
Oh, the glee singers
were always at the disposal of rural districts for concerts. Their selection of songs, recitations and Irish dances helped to rekindle the spark of nationality, which was at this time rapidly dying out.
In 1910, members of Sinn Féin demonstrated against the proclamation of George V as King at the Market Square. A small group of them ran up an Irish flag, as opposed to the Union Jack, and sang God Save Ireland instead of God Save the King.
No word, no sign of a word.
They told us to wait for the word. We've waited too long.
The messenger may have been caught. Perhaps the Gauls are marching from Galway too.
We'd best strike ourselves, so.
Is it to strike before the word is given?
We engaged in drills at the nearby rink and the adjoining athletic grounds. Our training exercises were done with wooden sticks and hurleys.
After the outbreak of the war and Redmond's recruiting speech, the whole thing broke up because Dundalk became a great recruiting town.
That's true. By August 1914, a serious split took place in the volunteers.
I joined the Irish Volunteers at some period subsequent to that split.
The county was divided into bitter camps, and many ugly clashes took place between rival parties at election times, not to mention the names they used to call each other. The bitterness did not end there, as it was always brought into local matters in Dundalk urban council elections, and was always on display at council meetings.
And in the early stages, the Irish Volunteers only had about 13 members. God, we got much annoyance from the National Volunteers and were constantly attacked on the streets.
Is it to die like rats you'd have us because the word is not given?
Our plans are not finished. Our orders are not here.
Our plans will never be finished. Our orders may never be here.
We've no one to lead us.
Didn't you elect me your captain?
It was a holy Thursday afternoon when Paddy Hughes comes into my office at the electricity works. Tommy said the word has come. We've to march for Dublin in full equipment and make Tara by Sunday night. I said, now Paddy, you wouldn't be making fun with me. No, he said, the messenger's just left, but I've to hurry away. Are you coming to the meeting tonight? I am, says I, 7. Certainly, says he, and he hurried off.
Well, I met Paddy Hughes on Good Friday 1916 at the Market Square, Dundalk, and he told me there was to be a mobilisation of the Dundalk Volunteers on Easter Sunday at 10 a.m, which I attended. When I approached, he asked me if I was familiar with the country roads around the R.D. Cullen Slane area. I said I was, and he told me to procure my cycle and to get a gun from 5 doors down from where I lived. I overtook the main body of men about 2 miles outside Dundalk. I estimate there were over 100 men marching towards RD.
From the time we commenced our march to Workhouse Hill on Easter Sunday morning, we had 2 members of the RIC with us, and them giving us their strict attention and close observation. Vehicles were used by men in relays to help combat the fatigue of constant marching. We arrived in the town of RD and we halted at Campbell's Hotel.
Well, when we arrived in RD, we were all halted in military formation. Paddy Hughes and O'Halloran were walking about in our vicinity, and they were handing out rifles to the men there. Anyway, they approached me and handed me a rifle and a quantity of ammunition. Sure, the ammunition was loose and I put it into me pockets.
This, I feel sure, can be recorded as the first successful raid for arms in our time on the enemy. At RD, 10 men from Dunleer joined us, armed in most cases with shotguns. Leaving RD unmolested, we proceeded towards Cullen and Slane. The progress now was slowing as our untrained men were tiring, and I'd be untrue to say that there was no grumbling as the rank and file of men did not know where our main objective lay.
About 3 a.m. it commenced to rain.
On our way to Slane, we got a message to the effect that all orders and movements were cancelled for the volunteers for that night, and that all men were to be disbanded until further notice.
Should the rain had become a regular deluge?
I said I would not obey these orders until I had it confirmed by Pearce. I started off towards Dublin, but in Finglas the sergeant of the RIC stopped me and told me not to go into the city, that Sinn Féiners were burning the city.
At this point the rain had cleared, but we were soaked to the skin.
Do not bid us rise out when the whole country is quiet. We were to get the word from the men that are over the people. They'll speak when the time comes.
They should have spoken before the Gaul marched.
What call have you to say what they should or should not have done?
Paddy Hughes came and told us that some men had left for home. I took exception to men leaving for home early. Some went back on yokes and some went walking. Sure, anyway, we kept ourselves as comfortable as possible and had a bit of a sing-song along the way.
At 6 a.m. O'Halloran shook us up and paraded us on the street, and I can assure you it was a stiff awakening indeed. Any person who has any doubts as to what effect walking 20 miles has on an untrained body, and then sit up all night on an unearthed floor, can take from me that they'll get up from that floor with every bone in their body, sore and aching, legs stiff and joints locked.
On Easter Monday morning we started marching back to Dundalk via RD. The RIC from Dundalk and RD again following us.
From Sunday morning until Monday afternoon, I had no sleep or rest of any kind, and I was cycling for most of it. I estimate I cycled over 200 miles, mostly on by-roads as we were avoiding the main roads, and soaked to the skin from the rain on Sunday evening.
A body named the Home Defence Corps were mobilised, armed by the military, and sent out to guard every road and every bridge into town.
We were in a sorry plight, wet to the skin. About 4 miles from Dundalk we were met by a girl from the Dundalk Cumann Mom, a Miss Clark, on a bicycle with a message that if we were to march back into Dundalk, we were in danger of attack from the Home Defence Forces off the town.
Just as I pulled up beside him, Paddy Hughes came running out. "What's the word?" he cried. "The volunteers sees Dublin at noon. The orders are to carry out the original instructions." "Did you see Pierce?" he asked me. "I did," I said. His words were, "Carry out the original instructions. We strike at noon."
Pickets were posted and we were given orders. Halt all traffic and seize all vehicles. But that caused a great deal of excitement and one or two regrettable instances, one of which I myself are to blame for. You see, I'd given my automatic to Paddy Hughes to mind for me, and he'd given it back to me a little while later, and I put it in my pocket without looking at it. And then later at one of the pickets there's a man on a horse and cart and he's refusing to dismount. Well, I drew out my automatic to intimidate him, and with that he aimed a whip at me head, so I kind of pulled back and, well, inadvertently me finger pressed the trigger and the gun went off, wounding him in the fleshy part of the arm. You see, the safety had been put to the firing position and I hadn't known it. Now I'm saying that as an explanation and not as an excuse.
I am saying that I'm going out the road to meet the Gaul if only 5 men of the mountain follow me.
You will not, Colin.
I will.
This is throwing away men's lives.
Men's lives get very precious to them when they have bought out their land.
Listen to me, Colin.
Whilst commandeering some cars, a party of RIC approached us from the Dundalk direction. We opened fire on them, but they didn't respond. Anyway, they had stopped some distance down the road and we stopped ourselves. We went on anyway, and we made prisoners of about 6 British soldiers who were travelling unarmed in one of the other cars that we had commandeered.
Volunteers took over the commandeered cars and we all started for Dublin again. At Castlebelham a motor car arrived, which I held up, and to my surprise it contained a British Army staff officer. I told him to get out of the car, and explained who we were and why we were acting as we were, also telling him he was our prisoner. Thus the whole police garrison of Castlebelham was standing in line, along with a British Army staff officer. As the guard had been withdrawn, the staff officer appeared to me as if he was attempting to draw a gun. I immediately called on him to put up his hands. He did not obey. I called again, and he again ignored my call. I called no more but fired, and to my amazement, the RIC man Constable McGee fell. Another shot then rang out and it caused his fire. What has happened has never been fully explained. Constable McGee was killed by a charge of buckshot fired from a shotgun, and the staff officer who fell to the ground as we were leaving the village was shot through the lung with a .303 bullet. He survived his wounding.
The man who fired the shot has never admitted to the mistake or the accident or whatever his motive was. So that now will remain his secret forever. I feel convinced that Constable McGee was killed accidentally. His death, as it happened, was regretted by all amongst the Irish volunteers. It was not our policy to shoot defenceless prisoners without good or sufficient reason. Anyway, every time we got together from that night, Constable McGee was prayed for by all of us who still survive.
Sometimes, when people watch, it is death that comes.
Could there be a royaler coming, Sheila? Once I wanted life, you and I to be together in the one place always. That is what I wanted, but now I see that we shall be together for a little time only. That I have to do a hard, sweet thing, and that I must do it alone. And because I love you, I would not have it different. I wanted to have your kiss on my lips, Sheila, as well as my mother's and Colin's, but I will deny myself that. Don't cry, child. Stay near my mother while she lives. It may be for a little while of years. You poor women suffer so much pain, so much sorrow, and yet you do not die until long after your strong young sons and lovers have died.
Near Dunshaughlin, we overtook some of the motor cars. The drivers of one of the motor cars ran into a conveyance and blocked the road. The drivers of the other cars which preceded the blockade went on ahead. Sure, they hadn't realised anything had gone wrong.
It must have been about 12 midnight when we realised that the 4 cars behind us weren't following us. There were 3 in front, 4 behind, 8 in all.
I decided to move on, assuming that the other cars would follow us to Tara. When we arrived at Tara, it was early morning, and the place was deserted. No one else had turned up, no other cars. So we decided to go in around Navan, but none of the missing cars turned up. So now there's only about 9 or 10 of us, in 3 cars still being driven by British military drivers. So I decided we should head on to Dunboyne and Blanchardstown.
We moved from there to Turleston House, where we billeted for 8 days, and while there commandeered a couple of sheep.
A girl came and told us that the rebels had been defeated, and that military knew where we were. We were to be surrounded that night by soldiers' artillery. Anyway, at dusk that evening, O'Hannigan came to us. He told us to get up, that everything was over.
I think that maybe Colm did what was right. We're too old to be at the head of work like this. Was McDara talking to you about the trouble?
He said that he would have to do a hard, sweet thing, and that he would have to do it alone. What's that noise like voices?
It is the boys coming up the hillside. There was a great crowd gathering below at the cross.
The men say we did wrong to let Colm go out with that little handful. They say we should have all marched.
And I say Colm was wrong to go before he got his orders. Are we all to go out and get shot down because one man is hot-headed? Where is the plan that was to come from Galway?
I went into the city, and by evening time I got into the GPO. And there's James Connolly sitting at a table writing. Well, I stood before him and I saluted him and I told him who had sent me to the city. And he looked up and he asked me my age and what part of Louth I came from. And I told him some of the things that had happened along the way. And then he just stood up and he shook me by the shoulder and he said, "The brave men of Louth."
On the 4th of May 1916, a roundup took place of many of the Dundalk participants in the rising. The RIC and military made simultaneous raids on a large number of houses and arrested about 30 volunteers in the early hours of the morning. Amongst the numbers arrested were some of the men returned from Turleston House. They were removed in handcuffs by train to Dublin and were put into Richmond barracks. On that same day, some of the leaders were taken from Richmond for execution in Kilmainham. When in Richmond, several of the Dundalk men were taken out and court-martialled, including Sean McEntee, James Sally, Dennis Leahy, Frank Martin and John Quinn. At their court-martial, all those were sentenced to death. Sentences later commuted to penal servitude. All the other Dundalk men in Richmond were, with one exception, deported to England for internment.
My name is Conal McGuill, and my great-grandfather James McGuill was a member of the Irish Volunteers in Dundalk in 1916. My great-grandfather was inspired into joining Republican politics by 2 local men, Patrick Hughes and Thomas Harty. In later life, my great-grandfather would mention one incident in particular involving Hughes and Harty, which would inspire his decision to become involved in Republican activism. The event was the reading of a proclamation in Market Square, Dundalk, greeting the coronation of George V as the King of England. The proclamation was read out with full pomp and ceremony by the local establishment. However, a group of less than a dozen, which included Patrick Hughes and Thomas Harty, set up a protest in the midst of the official ceremony, producing the Irish flag and singing "God Save Ireland," much to the dismay of the supporters of the official ceremony. I would definitely say that I am proud of my great-grandfather and his contribution to the Irish Volunteers in County Louth. Over the years, some have questioned the morality or the justification for the use of violence by the volunteers of Easter week. I think that's, a legitimate concern to have, and I'd agree that violence should only ever be used as a last resort. But I believe that my great-grandfather's time was an extraordinary time, and indeed was a time of last resort for Ireland. 1916, there was the ever-present possibility of conscription being imposed on Ireland. This would have meant that young Irish men could be sent, against their will, to fight a savage, imperialist war in Europe under the Union Jack. The 3 or 4 years prior to 1916 had also seen the anti-nationalist Ulster Volunteer Force organise, arm and drill with impunity. As well as this, there was the core fact that Britain's claim to legislate for Ireland was created and maintained through violence. From the Norman conquest to the Elizabethan wars, the Cromwellian invasion, through to the 1798 repressions, Britain's entire legal claim to Ireland was established at the edge of a sword and maintained at the barrel of a gun. I believe that the men and women who marched out on Easter week knew and understood this fact. And at a time when the Irish establishment, the politicians, the press, big business and the church hierarchy stood only for what was pragmatic or realistic or whatever didn't rock the boat, the Irish volunteers stood up for what was right. And I'm proud that my great-grandfather, James McGill, was amongst those volunteers.
It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart lies there. Pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile.
No man, then he died for his friend. Greater love hath no man, then he died for his friend. Greater love hath no man, then he died for his friend. Greater love hath no man, then he died for his friend.
Mrs. Macaulay received a letter from her son, a private in the Royal Munster Fusiliers. He's now in hospital in England. In it she was talking about Private William Scully of Dumleek, who is well known all around. He was a brother of Mrs. T. Goodman. Private Scully was one of the many that died that day, on the 15th of August, the Feast of Our Lady. I heard they lost about 400 men in 7 hours, and that was only the first day.
Did you hear? Lieutenant Fox was instantly killed yesterday. He was shot dead on the street. There was a load of group that was around him. There was blood everywhere. No one could have saved him. That was the saddest day of my life.
Did you hear about Mrs. Devine's sons? You know the Devines from Barrack Street? Joseph died of his wounds on 21st of May. And another son, James, a corporal in the Royal Irish Rifles, is wounded and convalescing in Lincolnshire. And another son is still at the front. All this after the death of her husband, Sergeant John Devine. God help the poor woman.
Did you hear about James Neville? He was the boy that's been missing since 1914. I heard he's after been found killed in action in France. But his mum was receiving false letters from a soldier, claiming that James was alive, and he knew where he was. The soldier was arrested, but while waiting to be put on trial, he escaped. He still hasn't been found.
Jared McGuinness. Sergeant McGuinness we called him. You'd find no finer engineer in the entire Mediterranean, working even under heavy fire. Only, we lost him at the age of 20 to a fatal mechanical accident. This sort of thing is weird, you know. It reminds me of all the soldiers that we didn't lose to the enemy gunfire.
Did you hear about O'Reilly? Up for promotion he was, and a decent man too, decent family man. Such a loss to his comrades. His wife's very upset, they say, very upset. And why wouldn't she be? Didn't she have the separation money now? You know, I'm no gossip, but I have to say, what must she feel now after carousing around town with her windfall of cash and a fancy man in tow? Isn't it lucky the husband is dead and didn't know any better?
Dear Dad, I hope my letter finds you well. How is it back home? Is the old town still lit up brightly in the warm glow of candlelight as usual? How's my brother? I do hope he's well. And Mother, sweet Mother, please tell her I love her and I send her my warmest wishes. Me, I'm doing grand. And our victory is near, and I have set up to live by the example which you have set for me. Dad, my hand trembles, I cannot lie. I have seen so much blood and death and horror that no man should bear witness to. We move by inches, each and every one of them paid for in blood. But to what end? Am I to win the freedom of our homeland by spilling the blood of thousands? Are these young men not fighting for their homeland just as we do? I don't understand it anymore. And Dad, I hear rumours from back home that people, they spit on our uniforms and refuse to share a smoke with us. Why don't they like us anymore? I always believed that we should all treat our fellow man with respect. We don't even have our own uniforms. What in God's name's gone wrong? Is the whole world gone mad? Forgive me, Father. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I am guilty of cowardice. The Lord, He is with us, and He suffered on the cross for us. And who am I to wail in front of Him? Tell my mother to pray for me, and tell my friends that I am well, and that I shall be well, and that all shall indeed end well, and I will be home by next Christmas. And Dad, order a novena to St. Anthony for me. I could really do with one. Love, your son.
To all who don't know me, my name is Mary Kane. And why would you know really? But you may have known my husband, James. James Hodgins. Born and bred in Drogheda. He fought with his heart and died with pride. My brave James was shot down with a single bullet to his head while serving in action in France. I was married to James for 13 years, and we have 4 beautiful children who are dearly treasured. And now we must join the many families who have lost someone they cherish for the purpose of freedom and war. History tells us the same story again and again. Will it ever change? In war, it's a man's world. A world which can never make sense to me. The brutality, killing, violence, and loss that we suffer. Is it worth it? Fighting for the British Army, James served his duty well. And in doing so, his family has been torn apart. And now we must face this harsh world without him and struggle on. What sense is there in all of this? For if we are not here for love and humanity, then I am surely dumbfounded as to how to make sense of my darling James's death.
If this is my country, I don't know what that is. There's fighting, but I'm just living, if you could call it that. What is my day? Never mind my country.
They're all dead or in jail now. Can't help but need us. Like little collection boxes, they thought. But look at us now.
What do I do every day? Feeding? Washing? What for? Who for? This is me waiting. What for? Who for?
Holding things. The handiness of a skirt sometimes to hide. Or trousers, some of us. And then they take a second look and maybe realise.
When will all this ever end, is all people keep talking about, because this will never end. These are the endless things, like feeding, like washing.
The things we are realising, little abilities like trinkets to be played with. Handling ourselves, walking in ways different to maybe our mothers. Meetings like masses, nothing is what it looks like here.
But we all know that, don't we? And do I agree with you? And if I don't, sure, what difference would that make anyway?
If it's organisation they want, we are, becoming excellent shots. But they'll be back soon.
Either way, no one's asking. I don't know history like from the books, but this here, now, today, this is history of a sort.
And needing us for less or other, and what then? Putting us back into places we may no longer fit into, to maybe charm us with poetry, the mystic if you like.
But I won't be written about, and what of it? Some other woman from some place will take my place and repeat.
Not me. I'll have the vote if you don't mind the please and thank yous. You can leave off talk of the colour of my eyes.
Was early, early in the spring, the small birds whistling, how sweet it sing, changing their notes from tree to tree, and the song they sang was "O Ireland Free." Was early, early on Tuesday night, the yeoman cavalry gave me a fright. To my misfortune and sad downfall, I was taken prisoner by Lord Cornwall. I chose the black and I chose the red. I forsook the red and the orange too. I did forsake them and them deny. I wore the green and for it I died. Was in all Ireland this young man died, and in all Ireland his body lay. Good people who do pass that way, pray the Lord have mercy on their happy boy.
Why on far who are Hamish? On for drink.
Now what, Paddy? What can honestly be made out of the ruin and wreckage that you and your lot have left in the wake? What, Paddy? What exactly has been the very bloody point? Tell me that, Paddy!
What were we to do? Spill our guts in France?
You know I don't agree with conscription, so don't use that against me.
You don't get it, Peter. You don't get it at all. This is an anti-imperialist war. We don't want to go get involved fighting in some European family feud. We want... You
don't know what you want.
We want to say on our own destiny. As high and mighty as it sounds. That's what we want.
There are ways and means of achieving these things, Paddy. None of which of us blown half the country to bits.
It was the British who shelled Dublin, not us.
Why couldn't you show more patience? You could have avoided spilling innocent blood.
Oh, innocent blood is it? What about all the men from County Louth whose blood saturates the fields of Europe?
There's never any talking to you, Paddy. You just won't listen to anything other than what you want to hear.
That's not fair. That's not fair, Peter. I believe in what I believe. And it's not born out of ignorance. And you damn well know that.
Why don't they come for you?
Oh, I hear they're rounding people up already. I'll not resist. But I am scared.
The council won't let anything happen to you. We're meeting tonight. You won't be abandoned.
Oh, we love to fight another day, so, huh?
I'm sick and tired of fighting, Paddy. Come on. We'll head for home and we'll take it from there.
I hope someday to it. Oh, could such hope be vain, when my dear country shall be made a nation once again?
Townspeople, please. People of Dundalk. Townspeople, let's have some order. Councillor Young, please have a seat. Councillor Hughes, please have a seat, everybody. Please, let's have some order. It is great pity I have for the misguided men who fought with such desperate bravery that often distinguishes Irishmen. In a mad fight in Dublin, they did not damage the British Empire, but only our own country.
I wish to report the Dundalk Urban District Council's condemnation of the deplorable outbreak in Dublin.
I am sure we are all sad at the state into which the country has been plunged into.
Indeed.
I do not think that since the passing of the Local Government Act that we have met in circumstances of such...
Well said,
People, it is up for Irishmen of every class and grade to make a choice of which of these two alternatives they will accept.
What has happened has a detrimental effect on the real political and business of Ireland.
Those sentiments might be shared by many, but those interests are not shared.
Madam, Irishmen must choose which they will have. Unsuccessful revolution and anarchy, or the constitutional movement.
We are calling on all nationalist Irish men to support John Redmond's constitution.
All Irish men, but of course it is men who procured the situation.
Exactly.
With due respects, madam, it is not with prejudice this is the case. It's simply the natural order.
So it's a natural order for women to give birth to their children, only to have them taken from them and sent to their deaths overseas in a foreign land. Is that your natural order, sir?
They were brave men.
They're dead men, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the lady's sentiments and I sympathise.
I'm glad to see some of your family does.
My brother's doings are not mine, as you are.
You voted for them to get the hall.
I voted for men to exercise their democratic right. That's all.
Now there's the word. Democratic, sir.
I can't say I agree with your tone, madam.
Oh, I dare say it's more than my tone that you don't agree with, sir.
You say what you mean, madam.
Order.
She means that there are words being bandied about by Irishmen of a certain class who seem blind to the realities of things. Irishmen must choose, must they?
Indeed.
And which Irishmen must choose? Which Irishmen have the means to choose, sir?
Yes, and what about Irish women? Do we not deserve the same right to choose?
No.
Let the lady speak. You have the floor.
The Irish Republic is entitled to and hereby claims the allegiance of every Irishman and Irish woman.
Order.
The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and all of its parts, cherishing all of the children of the nation equally, and oblivious to the differences fostered by an alien government that has divided a minority from the majority in the past.
Well said.
A national government, sir, representative of the whole island of Ireland and elected by the suffrages of all her men and her women.
People of Dundalk, there have always been extremists among us, and there have always been visionaries among us. Poetic and artistic people who live in a fairyland of their own imagination. There are people of both classes in other countries, and they don't start revolutions. In Ireland, our extremists and our visionaries would have been equally harmless if they had been left alone to their futile plotting of abortive plots and the dreaming of dreams.
I ask people now on both sides of this uprising not to be swept up in vengeance. Yes, the Old Testament preaches an eye for an eye. And in Ireland, this has for too long been how we have lived in practice. I am hoping that for once we can live as our Saviour Jesus Christ has taught us, loving thy neighbour and turning the other cheek.
700 years turning the other cheek.
I believe many of the young men and lads who were induced into taking part in the most unfortunate recent occurrences were led into these courses in ignorance of the real meaning.
As one who's wearing His Majesty's uniform, both as a private and a lieutenant, I desire to add my heartfelt manner, my appeal for clemency.
It is not the time to punish a nation as a whole for the follies of a small minority of people who, however misguided, fought for what they perceived were their God-given rights. Long overdue, long promised, and never delivered.
Clemency will tend towards the creation of better feeling.
True.
And lessen the bitter memories likely to be created by drastic action.
Clemency is an appeal that I join in. They were Irishmen. And we feel for them.
Yes.
And the way they have been led astray.
Very true.
What about the Irish women who've been incarcerated?
As far as we are aware, no women from Dundalk have been arrested.
That's right.
This is about Dundalk men. We are not here to interfere in the affairs of others. This is solely about Dundalk.
And Dundalk is like the rest of the country, neglectful of the women's rights.
People, this sounds like the socialistic spirit typified by Dublin law, which, as we all know, lent its most dangerous aid to the most recent campaign of destruction in Dublin. And let it also be known that it was the Carsonite treason that gave us an evil example and a new motive. But the most harmful of all the elements drawing hundreds of unthinking youth throughout Ireland into the most recent campaign of destruction was the incessant, continuous, fractious abuse of the Irish
Well said, Mr. Speaker.
Let those who will support the alternatives of unsuccessful revolution and anarchy, sane and serious men in Ireland whose minds have not been warped by self-esteem or blinded to their responsibilities as Irishmen, will they realise that there is only one alternative and the Irish Party stands
Mr. Speaker, if I may.
Indeed, Mr. Hughes.
I would like to say a word about the reason the movement was possible at all.
Well, you're closer to the heart of it than
And your brother behind you.
Let him speak, if I may. I would like to see a searching inquiry. Composed of men who could look into the matter and probe it to the very bottom. I believe that it was the actions of the British government in allowing Sir Edward Carson to do what he did, together with the officers' revolt at the Curragh, which has made this revolution possible. I believe that an impartial inquiry composed of men would be the best course to adopt in order to get to the real root and the real cause of this occurrence.
Another inquiry.
Townspeople, it is up to Irishmen, man, and those of them who are neither extremists nor vigilists, and who have not been blinded to their responsibilities as Irish men, to choose between the two alternatives presented to them here tonight. And if the majority of Irish men do not choose the path of sanity and prudence and stick to that path resolutely, well then we may bring the curtain down.
You will not write women out of history.
My sweet Patrick, do you remember how we first met?
I used to sit in the parlour room window helping Mother with the sewing. You caught my eye one day in your uniform, cycling down the street delivering the post. I didn't think you noticed me, until one day you smiled back. You were bold enough to come knocking on my door asking me to the Saturday dance. I loved that boldness. I still do. It's your courage and determination that's led you down the path you're on now. I'm so proud of you for standing up for what you believe in, for having the courage to fight for our nation and our family. Our family. You and little Mary are all that's left of our family now. I fought hard for myself and little Teresa. I tried to be as courageous as you, my love. I really tried. But this body of mine couldn't keep either of us from the arms of our Lord. I feel your grief as you lie in the blackness of your prison cell. But know that your grief is not endless. You will survive and carry on and find happiness once more. Ma and Da will look after Mary till the day you may return. Mary will never know her sister or her mother. But my life carried them both into this world. My blood is in her veins, the same blood that's in her sister's. Keep heart, my love. Keep your boldness alive, and we will always watch over you.
My name is Emer Kenny. I wish I could say that I knew my grandfather, Captain Henry Vincent Kenny, but unfortunately that isn't the case. Growing up, I had always known that he had been a member of the Irish Volunteers and had, as he would say, taken part in the 1916 insurrection. He was somewhat of an enigma, as this contrasted with the quiet-mannered man who retreated from the world in his later years to a remote cottage in the Dublin Mountains to paint landscapes. As a child, 2 of his paintings hung above my bed: vast grey skies and idyllic country scenes, mountains, lakes, a thatched cottage. A far cry from A Company, 3rd Battalion, Dublin Brigade in 1916, but perhaps that was the point. He never really spoke about his involvement in the insurrection to my father, who was one of his youngest, except to say that the roof of the GPO had been so heavily bombarded by shells that it was collapsing and that they had to leave. The fire had spread to the ceiling of the 1st floor. We do know that Henry risked his life that week by volunteering to go to Arnott's for red and white material, to make Red Cross flags, to ensure safe passage of the wounded to Jervis Street Hospital. British snipers and machine gun outposts controlled the streets. Following his arrest for his participation, he was interned in Frongoch, Wales. He was released in December 1916. During the armistice, at the end of the Civil War, a tragic incident further changed the course of my grandfather's life. At the start of the war, my grandfather made a pact with his best friend Jimmy Doyle that if anything happened to Jimmy, that my grandfather would look after his wife. Jimmy was a senior officer in the National Army and was shot dead in a 1st floor office in Parliament Street whilst overseeing the handing in of weapons. Jimmy had a young wife and a small baby. Henry, my grandfather, married Marcella and reared Jimmy's son as his own. The ideals of Irish freedom, honour and loyalty dominated the course of my grandfather's life.
I'm hugely optimistic about the future of our economy. You always have to be honest with yourself in life. If you conceal the facts, if you just distort the reality, then you fool yourself, you fool your people.
This is 7 big bridges. Yeah. So it's bridged off we can pay you back, which is never. you